If your own sister looked at you in the middle of a fight and said, "Tear her eyes out," would you do it? Because on February the 2nd, 1933, Léa Papin did. And this is why this case still feels so wrong. Not just brutal, wrong. Because there's a lot more going on here. You've got two sisters, a really messed up childhood, this wealthy household, all this pressure building for years, and then one night everything just explodes. Christine and Léa Papin were living maids in Le Mans, France. One evening, they murdered their employer's wife, Léonie Lancelot, and her daughter, Geneviève, in a way so violent that France could not stop talking about it. And this is where it gets even weirder. A lot of people did not only react with horror, some actually felt sorry for the sisters. Some saw them as victims, some saw class revenge, some saw madness, and some saw two women who had become so wrapped up in each other that once things went bad, there was no stopping them. I keep coming back to this case because every time I think I understand it, something throws me off again. So let me walk you through it, because the murders were shocking, yes, but the part before the murders matters just as much. Christine was born in 1905. Léa was younger. Even in the material around this case, some smaller details shift depending on the source, which already tells you this is one of those stories where fact and legend started sticking together. But the main timeline is clear enough. The sisters were born in Le Mans to Clémence Duret and Gustave Papin. And honestly, almost nothing about that family sounds safe. There were rumors around town that Clémence had been involved with her employer. Gustave was jealous, angry, and drinking. The marriage was unstable for a long time. Then things got darker. Their older sister, Emilia, was allegedly abused by their father when she was still a child. I need to pause there for a second, because one of the worst details in this whole story is what supposedly happened next. Their mother did not protect Emilia. She blamed her. She believed the girl had somehow caused it. That is such a twisted response that it kind of tells you everything about the emotional world these girls came from. Emilia was sent away to the Bon Pasteur Catholic orphanage, which was known for being strict. Later, Christine ended up there too. Then Léa as well, after the relative caring for her died. So now the sisters are being passed around, sent away, raised under discipline, while their home life is full of shame, instability, and a mother who seems to have looked at them less like daughters and more like future workers. Because there is another huge part of this. Clémence did not want to keep supporting them. She wanted them old enough to work. She wanted them bringing money in. Emilia eventually entered religious life and stayed away from the family. Christine also wanted to become a nun for a time. The mother stopped that. She wanted Christine in domestic service. So Christine learned housework, cooking, cleaning, everything needed to run someone else's home. By most accounts, she was very good at it too. Hardworking, skilled, a good cook, but also strong-willed. Not the time to just silently disappear forever into a background. Léa was different. Quiet, obedient, more shy, more withdrawn. The kind of young sister who seems to have followed Christine's lead in almost everything. And even though their childhood had been broken up and messy, the two of them became extremely close as they got older. Whenever they could work together, they wanted to. They kept choosing the same life, same place, same room, same routine, same person. They did not seem to build much of a world outside each other. That matters a lot later, because when I say they were close, I do not mean normal sister close. I mean the kind of closeness that starts to feel sealed off, like a room with no windows. In 1926, Christine got a job with the Lancelot family at 6 Rue Brie in Le Mans. This looked like a good position, stable, respectable, well paid for the time. After a few months, she asked Madame Lancelot to hire Léa too, and she agreed. So now both sisters are working in the same upper-class home. The family was René Lancelot, a retired solicitor, his wife Léonie, and their younger daughter Geneviève. Their older daughter had already married and moved away. And at first, this setup looked almost ideal. The sisters had a heated room, they ate the same food as the family, they were paid standard wages, they had steady work. Some accounts even say the Lancelot were envied by other households for having such dedicated servants. So this is where the case starts splitting in two. Because one reading is very simple. The sisters had a decent arrangement and still committed a horrifying crime. But the other reading is that life inside that house changed over time and became much darker than it looked from the outside. And both of those readings are part of the case. Some accounts say the sisters became attached to Madame Lancelot and even called her Mama. Their own mother, meanwhile, was reportedly called that woman. That is sad all by itself. Because whether that was affection, emotional dependence, or something more complicated, it tells you these sisters were trying to place a mother role onto their employer. That says a lot, honestly. It really feels like they were looking for something in her they never got at home. But later, the atmosphere in the house seems to have changed. Some accounts say Leonie became depressed, colder, harder to please, more controlling, more severe. She gave instructions by note, she checked for dust with the white glove, she criticized their work more and more. And then come the abuse allegations. Now, here I want to be careful. Not every dramatic detail in this case is equally solid. The story has been retold so many times that some parts got bigger with each retelling. So I do not want to say every single abuse claim is proven beyond all doubt, but in the sources I found there are repeated claims that Leonie humiliated the sisters, physically punished them, pinched them, and in some versions even banged one of their heads against a wall. There is also a story where Léa missed a tiny scrap of paper while sweeping, and Leonie made a whole humiliating scene over it. If even part of that is true, then what looked like a respectable house from the street may have felt like a pressure cooker inside. And I think that is why France later split over this case. Because if you believe the sisters were treated fairly, then this looks like pure savagery. If you believe they were trapped in a tense, degrading, maybe abusive environment, then the violence still looks terrible, obviously, but it stops feeling random. Then comes Thursday, February the 2nd, 1933, the day the whole thing breaks. Leonie and Geneviève had been out shopping. There was a dinner planned later that evening. René was expected elsewhere too. The sisters believed the family would be out and not really back until later, so they kept doing chores. At some points, Christine picked up an iron from repair. When she plugged it in, it blew a fuse and the house went dark. And I know this sounds like a tiny detail compared to everything else, but that broken iron really stays with me. This huge case, all this horror, and one of the things right in the middle of it is basically just some stupid problem with an iron. The sisters decided to leave the fuse until morning. Their reasoning seems simple enough. The family would be out late, come back tired, go to bed, and it could all be dealt with the next day. But Leonie and Geneviève came home early. That is the turn. That is the second where the whole story tells. The women walked into a dark house. Christine explained what happened with the iron and the electricity. Then, according to Christine, Madame Lancelot became furious and physically attacked her. Now, that matters a lot, because the sisters later claimed self-defense. So, was there really a physical attack? Was Christine describing it that way afterward to justify what came next? That is one of the big questions in this case. We do not know with perfect certainty. What we do know is that within moments, things became unbelievably violent. Christine hit Leonie with a pewter jug or pitcher. Geneviève jumped in to defend her mother. Then Christine attacked Geneviève and gouged out her eyes. And after that, Christine ordered Léa to attack Leonie and tear out her eyes too. And Léa did it. What really gets me there is not just how violent it was, but how fast Léa went along with it. The younger sister followed. just like that. From there, the violence got worse and worse. A hammer was brought in, a knife was used, the pewter object was used again until it was badly deformed. The women were beaten, stabbed, and mutilated. Their faces were left in such terrible condition they were said to be hard to recognize. And what makes this even more disturbing is that it was not over in a flash. The attack was later estimated to have lasted around 30 minutes. 30 minutes. By that point, this had gone way past panic. Something had seriously broken. And the details stay horrifying. Skirts were lifted. Deep cuts were made to the thighs, buttocks, and legs. One source says Christine later said that kind of cutting came from how rabbit was prepared for cooking. That detail is awful. But it matters, because it shows how domestic work, butchery, rage, and humiliation all seem to crash together in that hallway. There is also the claim that menstrual blood from Genevieve was smeared onto Leonie's body. I came across the detail in one article, and honestly, it makes it easier to see why this case shocked people so much. It made it feel even more twisted. Then comes the part that feels cold in a completely different way. They did not run. They did not take money. They did not try to disappear. They cleaned themselves. They locked the house. They went upstairs. They took off their bloodied clothes. And they got into bed together. Naked, waiting. I mean, that image alone is enough to keep a case alive for decades. By that point, it doesn't even feel like chaos anymore. It just feels really eerie, like they knew it was over and were just waiting for someone to come upstairs. That evening, René Lancelin went to dinner and realized his wife and daughter had never arrived. He came back home with his son-in-law. The house was dark. The front door was bolted from the inside. Only the sisters' room showed light. Police were called. An officer entered the house and found Leonie and Genevieve upstairs. One of Genevieve's eyes was found on the stairs. Another was under her body. Leonie's eyes were reportedly tangled in her scarf. Even now, it sounds unreal, like something from a nightmare, not from a respectable house in town. At first, they feared the sisters had also been killed. Then they reached the sisters' locked room. A locksmith had to open it. And inside were Christine and Léa in bed with a bloody hammer nearby. They confessed immediately. Christine said, "It was her or us." Léa reportedly said, "From now on, I'm deaf and dumb." That line from Léa always gets me. It sounds like someone trying to vanish on the spot. The case exploded across France. Newspapers went wild. Crowds followed the trial. The sisters were called Les Diaboliques, basically the she-devils. People could not look away. But what happened next is what made this case bigger than an ordinary murder trial. A lot of people did not see only two killers. They saw class tension. Two maids, one rich house, female servants living upstairs, working long hours, tied to routine, tied to obedience, tied to someone else's standards, then turning on the mysteries of the house with unimaginable violence. For a lot of writers and thinkers, this looked like a class rage bursting into view. Names like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean Genet, and Jacques Lacan all became tied to this case in different ways. The murders were read as something symbolic, something bigger than the crime itself. And to be fair, I get why. The class angle is not hard to see. But I also think there is another side to that. Once intellectuals get hold of a crime, real people can turn into symbols very fast. And yes, the class reading matters, but so do the two women who died in that hallway. A mother and a daughter were butchered in their own home. That part should not disappear just because the case became useful for larger theories. At trial, the defense argued insanity. There was family history they could point to. A cousin in an asylum, an uncle who took his own life, stories of instability in the family, Christine's increasingly troubling behavior, the sisters' extreme isolation, their strange closeness, And then comes one of the most famous ideas linked to this case, folie à deux, shared psychosis. The idea is that two closely connected people, especially if isolated, can end up trapped in a shared mental world, often with one leading and the other following. In this case, that would mean Christine as the dominant one and Léa as the more submissive one. And honestly, the theory fits some parts of the story very well. The bond was intense. The isolation was real. Christine clearly seems stronger and more forceful. Léa seems like the follower. But again, there is another way to see it. 3 court experts said the sisters were sane enough to stand trial. The prosecution looked at the confession, the locked house, the cleanup, the fact that they stayed put, and saw awareness, not madness. So even here the case refuses to become simple. Were they mentally ill? Were they fully aware? Did they share some distorted reality together? Or did later people lean harder into that idea because they needed a way to explain something this extreme? I think there is room for more than one answer there. The jury reached a verdict fast. Léa got 10 years because she was seen as being under Christine's influence. Christine got the death sentence by guillotine. That is hard to even picture now. Public execution was still a real possibility. Her sentence was later commuted and she was resentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. Then the story turned sad in a different way. The sisters were separated in prison. Christine did not cope with that well at all. She begged to see Léa. She had violent outbursts. She stopped eating. At one point, she reportedly tried to gouge out her own eyes, which is one of those details that feels so grim it almost loops the whole story back in on itself. There was also one deeply strange meeting between the sisters where Christine reportedly undressed and begged Léa to say yes, which later fueled rumors that their relationship may have been sexual or incestuous. But again, that was speculation, not proof. And I think we have to be careful there. Two traumatized, deeply fused sisters are very easy for outsiders to sexualize, especially in a case this sensational. Their bond was clearly intense, maybe unhealthy, maybe far beyond ordinary sister closeness. But rumor is still rumor. Christine kept getting worse. She was transferred to a psychiatric institution in Rennes. She continued refusing food and died there in 1937 of cachexia, essentially wasting away. Léa survived. She served around 8 years and was released in 1941 for good behavior. After that, she seems to have lived quietly under another name and worked again as a maid or a hotel servant. Even her ending stays uncertain. Some accounts say she died in 1982. Others say a filmmaker later found her in a hospice in 2000 after a stroke and that she died in 2001. One article I found did mention the later date, but even then, it still didn't sound 100% certain that they had actually found Léa, which feels fitting, honestly. Even the ending will not sit still. And then the case just kept spreading. Books, plays, films, essays, art. Jean Genet, the maid, is constantly connected to it, even if that connection is debated. The Papin sisters became this dark cultural reference point for female rage, servitude, class, mental illness, and violence. But I think I keep coming back to it. It's smaller than all of that. They grew inside daily life. Cleaning, ironing, notes, a strict house, a tight routine, 2 sisters upstairs, a woman checking for dust with a white glove, one fuse blowing, and then everything tears open. I think this case stays with people because it all came out of normal everyday life, just chores, routine, a house that looked fine from the outside, and then everything fell apart. Even now, people look at this case really differently. Some think the sisters were just monsters. Some think they were badly damaged and finally snapped. And some people see the whole thing through class or mental illness. And maybe the most uncomfortable answer is that pieces of all of that are true at the same time. This is what makes the case so hard to file away. Your brain wants one clean label. This story does not give you one. So I really want to know where you land on this. When you look at Christine and Léa Papin, do you mostly see brutal killers, deeply broken sisters, or two women who became symbols for something much bigger after one horrifying night? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more cases like this, the ones that stay messy, eerie, and human in the worst possible way, like the video, subscribe, and tell me what case I should cover next.